Hello and welcome to week one. So in this video I'm going to talk a little bit at a high level about chapter one and some of the more important concepts of chapter one. So in chapter one it's all about introducing you to the concepts of strategy and how strategy can help an organization be successful. I loved the analogy of Queen Elizabeth and Lady Gaga. I thought that was really relevant and really helped to bring it home. I also liked it because I'm kind of hooked on the Netflix series The Crown, so I especially liked the Queen Elizabeth analogy. I like that the book is calling out the differences between strategy and tactics. This is a concept that I often see people get confused about. I've been to many meetings where we are supposed to come to talk about strategy, and everybody comes prepared to talk about tactics. I think it's kind of human nature, and sometimes it's hard to pull ourselves out of the weeds and think high level, and that's what strategy needs. I also think sometimes talking about tactics is a little more exciting or engaging. But I've seen many managers struggle with that when they get promoted to executive level positions for that very reason. They just can't pull themselves out of the weeds. Your book talks about, I thought your book did a good job of describing the differences between, mission, value, strategy, goals. So your book states that a mission describes the organization's purpose, why we exist. Values define what we believe in and how we will behave. And the vision projects what we want to be. And then the strategy articulates the company's competitive game plan. So strategies about the current, today, and the future of an organization, and the strategy must address both of those. The book describes these as positioning and direction, and this is talked more about in chapter 8, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So what I do want to chat about briefly from this chapter is the concept of design versus emergence. And this is an interesting concept that I think will be helpful as we get into some of our assignments and our weekly discussions. And it's highlighted as intended strategy, realized strategy, and emergent strategy. So intended strategy is essentially what's posted on a company's website. And so this is what the CEO and his team of executives come up with essentially. The realized strategy is the actual strategy that is implemented. And in your book it says that typically only 10 to 30% of intended strategy is actually realized. And then emergent strategy is how managers interpret the intended strategy, and then they adapt that to the actual circumstances, and then that results in the decisions that they make. So the realized strategy is really based on what happens in the emergent strategy, which is only 10 to 30% of the intended strategy. So I think it's a great way to think about it. And I challenge you to think about the way this relates to the organization that you work for today. Go out and take a look at your company's website and see what their intended strategy is, and then think about, if you're a manager or an executive of that company, think about how you implement that, or maybe think about how your boss is actually implementing that strategy. The book talks about or teaches that most companies have a combined approach to strategy. So they call it strategy as design and strategy as process. So strategy is design, that's your intended strategy, and then strategy is process, that's the emergent strategy. They both come together and end up with the realized strategy, but they have very different approaches to that. I will, comment as I try to bring this back to project management in the PMBOK, that a project manager is probably not going to be involved in setting the corporate strategy for the entire company, unless it's a really small company. That could be the case. But I will say that the company's overall strategy will certainly drive what projects are actually pursued. So if we go to Chapter 1 of the PMBOK, so that was one of your reading assignments for this week, what I would pull out of that is there is a discussion about the project business case, which that directly ties to this class and the topics that we will discuss. So a business case is essentially a feasibility study identifying the benefits of a project that will help determine if that project is going to be selected or pursued. And then if a project is selected, that business case is used throughout the project life cycle, and the project manager will certainly need to become very familiar with that business case. In fact, the business case is an input for one of the very first things that happens in a project, and that is to develop the project charter. All right, that's all for week 1.